Okay, I have a really interesting video about immigration and levels from 1850 to 2025. And this video only takes 8 minutes, so you should watch the whole thing. It should be great for immigrants and Canadians just to get an idea about where Canadians came from. And I think it'll give you, some ideas about the problems that we currently have and maybe how we can fix them. Anyway, let's just start watching and I'll narrate over it because you can see the numbers moving. So as you can see at the start, it was mostly Ireland in 1850. Now it's the UK. And in 1850, there were around I think 2.4 million people in Canada. So a lot different than it is today, which is over 40 million. Immigrants are rising from the UK. You can see by 1867, when we became Canada, you can see it was mostly immigrants from the UK, some Russia, Italy a little bit, the US, which is still basically the similar makeup of what Canadians were. So this is really 1867, here are the levels, mostly UK, um, and Europe at that time. And there were only by that time, there were around 3.5 million people by 1867. And from 1867 to 1914, before the wars, essentially, the world wars, we had, we had 3.5 million people, and then we had in 1914, by that time, we're gonna get up to 8 million. So we're slowly cruising up. But as you can see, it's mainly immigrants from the UK and Europe still. You see a little bit in the top 10 list is China on the bottom, but still not very many people by, not by the 1900s. It's slowly coming up. And what's really wild, you'll still see later why it becomes interesting. So for a little small period, it's not as interesting, I guess you could say. 1885, there was a railroad that came across the country, and that made people settle in Western Canada. They were mainly, of course, coming over in ships to the East Coast from Europe, and that changed where people could live. So the cities could get much bigger after that. And, like early on, also, the Chinese weren't even allowed to come over really. Um, I forget which time. I think that's the next period exactly, but there was different things politically going on which made this true, but like as you can see, the immigration is still mainly European, which is interesting. Not surprising because that's what Canada mainly was from, as most people know. But then it changed a lot in recent history, and I showed a video of that since I was born in 1981, but it's interesting to see before what it was. So basically, all the immigrants, okay, pretty much were from European descent, and that's why Canada is so much different now when you think about it, because it's so multicultural. But when did that happen exactly? So by 1914, now we're up to 1925. We had 8 million people. By 1945, after the world wars, we had 12 million people. And we slowed down immigration at this period a lot during the war and the Great Depression and everything. We didn't do very well. And then the next section is coming up soon in 1945. We went from 12 million people around that into 1967 to 20 million. So that's the baby boom generation after the war. That's why they always talk about it after the war, how much it boomed. It went from 12 million people in 1945 all the way up, to 20 million, almost doubling in 20 years. So it's a huge difference, and that's why things changed a lot. And then in 1947, the ban on Chinese immigration was lifted. And then in 1967, the point system was introduced. And that's quite interesting when you think about. the how we switched to a merit-based system. So that changed a lot. So that was in 1967, which is very interesting to note. Okay, so now we're still in the baby boom generation. 1956, still mainly the UK. Like, it's very interesting how many, so we're getting almost 1,000,000 immigrants a year from the UK, even in the 1960, and that to me is quite surprising, like, just how much of it was from Britain. And you think, "Oh, yeah, it's mostly that," but it really was a lot of that, and even at this time, Italy wasn't even that much. Now in the '60s, it's really coming up, Italy as well. So, there are a lot of Italian immigrants, of course, in Canada, on my mom's side that came, by before their Italian immigrants, like half of them, on my grandmother, but that came before this, but still, and then on my most of mine, I'm like 3 quarters from the UK, so it's not surprising where, most of the Canadians came from. That was the descent. But now you can start to see by 1980 things are changing. You see Hong Kong coming up a lot more, and especially they settled in Vancouver, a lot different. And then the immigration policies changed a lot. We started switching to Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean a lot more. You see India finally coming up, was nowhere even on the board until the 1980s, really. And it was around 100,000 at that time in 1980. Now it's already doubled in a decade, which is pretty crazy, and that's something of note, and some of that's why a lot of things change so much. You can see China coming up, the Philippines coming up. So these countries from Southeast Asia really came up and really changed drastically from the period of 1980 to now, so 2025. You can imagine, why some countries have a problem with certain, groups. These are much different cultures. Like, it's not has nothing to do with race. You just think about how many more are coming in. Like, before it was mainly the UK, and now look, it's already overtaken them by 2008. It looks like 2009, actually. China and India have overtaken the UK, and then it drastically goes down from there. And you can just think about it, just how different that is. Just look at the numbers. Like, it's changed so much so quickly. And you have to keep in mind, um, in 2000, we had 30 million people. 2025, we have over 40 million people, and most of these are immigrants, and a lot of them are from India. So it's really crazy to think about how much Canada has changed in such a short time. And this is really why I wanted to talk about this. This is the history of Canada. This is how we became, Canada. And these are the numbers. These are the real numbers when you think about it. It's absolutely crazy and how different it's become. So it really has become so different in just a few years. How many people are here now from a different place, and not just a different place. It's not has nothing to do with race. These are completely different cultures. So many Indians coming in, and now we have problems again. Like, why did we let in so many so quickly from a different group? And that's really sparks a discussion. Now we have so many problems with housing, jobs, and infrastructure. We can't support it. And you hear about history repeating itself, but it is really wild how we ended up here again having issues. I get it when, we had it after the war, they needed people. um, it's not like we don't need anybody, but it's really interesting to think about where, why did we get so many in afterwards? And especially during the Trudeau era, where he brought so many more in that were, some people claim it was necessary. I don't really believe that we needed those numbers. Well, clearly it didn't work very well. So Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. I thought it was really interesting just how quickly it changed the mix of immigrants that came in, and just the whole video, how you can get a time lapse really of Canadian history in 8 minutes, and I think it's, worth noting for Canadians and immigrants, and, I hope you liked the video and you subscribe to the channel, and I will see you on the next one.